Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is the Piracy Show. Now, on today's show, we are, of course, dealing with the Reclaimer and taking the Reclaimer out to do battle, though doing battle was not the intention of this episode. In fact, one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to take the Reclaimer down to a moon. I wanted to basically kind of plant it down on Daymar in one of those canyons. And then I wanted to start this video off with, the dramatic music, and you'd like see me staring off of the ridge of a canyon towards the sunset or whatnot. And then all of a sudden I would turn and pan the camera down and we would see the Reclaimer. By the way, the new airlock sounds are horrifying. Please get rid of them. The new graphics on the panels are great, but that compressor sound, yeah. Ugh. But moving on. So yeah, that was the intention. I wanted to get this thing down to Daymar, land it in a canyon, do this whole dramatic thing like, ooh, I've got the Reclaimer, it's in universe, ooh. But yeah. And also I had a little difficulty here finding my way down to the Reclaimer. There's actually a new doorway. Like when you first walk out, there's another doorway off to the left. If you go a little further, that takes you out to the Reclaimer platform, but I didn't know that. So I was trying to find my way down to the Reclaimer and nearly killed myself doing it. But at least I didn't break my legs and then die of blood loss. We remember those days and we're glad that they're gone. But the PTU right now just doesn't it doesn't seem to be working out all that well. Now, those of you who participated in the 3.0 PTU will know exactly what I'm talking about. In the 3.0 PTU, the game was in a very rough state, and we were always struggling just to get the most basic things done. There's plenty of videos of me trying to do that from back in December, and this certainly is very reminiscent of that. So I don't look at this and say, oh, well, clearly when this gets out into everybody else's hands, it's going to be this bad and it's going to be this unstable. Maybe it's relative to the hardware that we're playing on now versus the hardware we're going to be playing on once it goes out to everybody. I don't know. But when we got 3.0 out to everyone, it was a lot more stable than what we were playing with in the 3.0 PTU. And so I think that this is probably going to be relatively the same thing. I'm not too worried about it. I also somehow picked up a pretty high crime stat stowaway while loading into my Reclaimer. So that was a fun little surprise on my first trip out with the Reclaimer. But, reality of the universe and the way the game is kind of built out right now, I guess anybody can just kind of hop on anybody's ship, or at least activate the elevators, because they clearly didn't sneak on with me. I don't know. But yeah, so I originally kind of wanted to fly down to Daymar, and unfortunately, because the crime stat rating, it seemed that, I was kind of confused as to what was going on. I kind of was going like, okay, so clearly someone snuck onto my ship, and I was trying to think of how they did that, and I was still trying to find a way down to Daymar, and I end up getting ambushed by NPC pirates. There was a pirate Caterpillar, pirate Connie, and a pirate Aurora. Now, it's kind of funny because a while ago I had made a video where I said, one of the first things I want to do is I want to get interdicted in the Reclaimer and take it out to fight a pirate Caterpillar, and that's exactly what's going to happen here. Is I am going to end up fighting actually 3 pirate ships, and surprisingly, spoiler alert, the Reclaimer wins. Seemingly the top turret is still non-functional at this time, though in every subsequent attempt that I made over the weekend to try and get back into the Reclaimer and try to film something, the game always died before I was able to test things, and so I was only really able to fly it in free flight after that. So as far as I know, the top turret is still non-functional, though in the latest patch, which is now Tuesday, the Reclaimer and the Terrapin have actually been pulled from the build So maybe that will be functional in a future public release that you will all get of 3.1. But right now, yeah, it wasn't working. So I had to do this all with the front guns, and they seem to do pretty fair work, though. Getting used to navigating something as big as the Reclaimer in combat was something of a challenge. And so what I guess my default behavior is always to start side strafing and start shooting at the enemy, and so that's what you're gonna kind of see me doing, though the Reclaimer isn't much for side strafing itself. So it was pretty challenging. I guess getting used to a ship like this in combat is going to require a lot of practice and a different approach than using a fighter or using, like a cutlass. It's going to require a whole different way of looking at things, which will probably be the subject of, future videos once we can get back into it, once it's stable, and once we can kind of experiment with how to use it. But also, clearly, this is a ship that's designed to be used by multiple people, and not having the top turret or the rear turrets working, impacted the situation. If I had people working all the guns, then things probably would have turned out differently. Pretty soon, you're going to see my stowaway dip in on the right side of the screen, though, thank you to whoever that was for not shooting me in the cockpit while I was doing battle with the pirates. That was, I mean, you did get me crime stat rating, but at least, you weren't being a full dick about it and shooting me in the cockpit while I was trying to fight off, a pirate onslaught. But yeah, I mean, the current state of the PTU doesn't really bother me, because once again, the 3.0 PTU was a lot rougher than this, and so I'm kind of sitting there and thinking, by the time it gets out to everybody, they should have a lot of these things ironed out. But right now, getting into the PTU, yeah, I mean, you've got 5 to 10 minutes before the game just completely just says, no, I can't do this anymore. So it was really difficult to get footage out of this. Now, some of the things that I'm going to point out, like the internal glare on the cockpit windows, like you can see some light reflecting on the inside of the cockpit windows. I guess that's for atmosphere or whatnot. Yeah, that we can go ahead and do without that. That is just impacts your line of sight, and you really shouldn't be having that in the first place. In the very first versions of Arena Commander, we used to have a serious problem with that with the M50, where in certain environments in the Vandal Swarm, when you were turning your ship around, the entirety of the exterior environment would be reflected on the inside. There he is. Reflected on the inside of your cockpit, and that would totally obscure your vision. This isn't as bad, but it needs to go. I mean, I get that, it looks like we're in a spaceship and it's adding more detail. It just subtracts from the game. It really does. It subtracts from the experience. And, there are certain things that you might say, add realism, but realistically, they don't. They don't really give you anything, and they're more of an annoyance than look how detailed it is. It has the reflection of light on the window. But here you're going to see me engaging the pirate caterpillar, and this is right about the time that the server, I guess, decides that it's had enough, and it begins falling into its death throes. So I was hoping for a much smoother experience, but it very quickly kind of turns into a PowerPoint presentation. I mean, I was able to use it and I was able to fight, but directing the guns, when your frame rate really starts to bog down, it becomes very difficult to direct your weapons. And obviously, had things been performing smoothly up at around 60 frames a second, then things would have been resolved a lot sooner. Because you can see the Reclaimer is chopping through the shields of that caterpillar fairly quickly. The problem is keeping the pipper on the target is quite challenging, and eventually, like, my entire heads-up display, like my pipper, all that stuff, they eventually just disappear. So by the time I'm fighting the Aurora, I have to entirely eyeball it and just go shooting right about here, and then I'm also dealing with the frame rates. So I think it was a slight miracle that I survived, but yeah, I was able to pull it off, but it was challenging and frustrating at the same time. Now, like I said before, I mean, you know, we had the same issues in the 3.0 PTU, so I'm not too concerned about it. You know, once we got to the 3.0, like the live version, things ran a lot better than what they were in the PTU. I know that's, some people would say, oh my god, really? How bad was it? And it was like, dude, it was pretty brutal. there were days where it's like, I'm only doing this for footage. I'm only doing this for footage. I'm only doing this for footage. You know, it was just like, argh. And it very much is a frustrating experience now. I mean, for me to get to Grim Hex, just to get the, you know, that normal microid battlesuit set of armor that I wear, which is like kind of like the one that you see in the Pathfinder demo, that sort of desert suit with the cloth bits and the cape hanging off of it, because obviously you need to have a cape. For me to get to Grim Hex and get that armor was, that took about 2 days for me to actually just to make the trip from Olisar to Grim Hex. 2 days worth of attempts. Because, you know, I figured, oh, you know, once I get the Reclaimer down, you know, it's just 1 or 2 patches away, and if I already have this armor saved up, then I can just pull it out, and I can just go, and I'll be standing there on that cliff, you know, and then I'll turn and I'll pan to the Reclaimer, and I'll have that armor just kind of like with all the cool bits on it. It'll look really awesome. So I went to, you know, I repeatedly tried to go and get that armor with multiple different ships, and it just always ended in tragedy. But I mean, I don't think that this is really indicative of the game's final performance. I mean, who knows what they're doing? I mean, CIG might just be experimenting with different hardware setups, trying to find that sweet spot between, you know, cost and performance, you know, a place where they're comfortable. Because you have to remember that at some point in the near future, we're going to start buying ships in the PTU. We're going to, like, by the time we get to ArcCorp, you know, there's that big ship retailer on ArcCorp in Area 18, and we're going to be able to buy ships and ship components there. And once that becomes available, the CIG's income from ship sales might start to really dry up. And so they're probably looking at ways to minimize the cost of operating the game. And so maybe this is reflective of that. I'm not saying it in a negative way, like, oh yeah, all CIG trying to cheap out on the hardware, make the game shitty, you know, nothing like that, because every game developer and every publisher is going to do the same thing. They're going to look at trying to find the most efficient setup, you know, cost and performance wise, that works for players but also works for them and makes the business sustainable. And in the end, that's one of the things that we kind of want from Star Citizen, is at the end of the day, we want a game to play and not a game that's like, we can't even afford to run this. Sorry, click, doors are shut. And then we're all left like, just going like, well, it was fun while it lasted, you know. None of us want to end up in that situation, so you kind of have to make some allowances. And yeah, here's where the HUD starts to fall apart, and we're now fighting an Aurora. And I think I killed the Aurora by ramming it. If I remember correctly, like the Aurora rams into me, which is kind of one of the funny things that was in 3.0, is that sometimes pirates, when they make their high-speed attacks on you, they just end up crashing into you. And it looks like at this time around, it kind of worked in my favor. Because, yeah, Aurora v Reclaimer in a ramming attack. doesn't usually work out for the Aurora. So at this point, the footage has pretty much slowed down to a slideshow, and we are going to pretty much end things off here. I mean, the Aurora is going to die eventually. It's just a lot of eyeballing it, and as you can see, the game is not cooperating, so we're just going to kind of step away from this footage now and you know, go back to something a little bit smoother and more watchable. So that is a little bit of combat footage of the Reclaimer in the current state of the PTU, such as it is. Now, if you do get an invite to the PTU, I would honestly say the way it's behaving right now, it's probably better for your own, you know, sanity to just hold out and wait for everything to come out on the PU. I mean, I'm switching back to the PU starting with tomorrow's video just because, you know, the amount of work that I had to do and the amount of times that I had to try to get that footage was, you know, it wasn't productive in terms of sanity or time invested. So hopefully by the time it gets out to everybody, it's going to be running a lot more stable. That's been generally what's happened in the past, so I don't see why we can't expect it in the future. But that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.